So, welcome, guys, to the Sales Architect podcast. I'm here today with Aaron Evans, who is the Director of Sales Enablement at Global Data. Hey, Aaron, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Anytime, anytime. Well, thank you for coming on. There's lots to learn from you, I think, today. So, first of all, if you could start off by just telling us like who you are, what you do at the moment, maybe a bit of the history of where you've come from as well, and then we'll dive into some of the more meaty stuff afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Aaron Evans. I work for an organisation called Global Data. We're actually the fastest growing business intelligence and analytics company on the London Stock Exchange. My history has been quite varied in terms of the types of organisations I've worked in and certainly the geographies I've worked in. But I've been doing sales enablement for about 13 years, and I like to say I've been doing it before it was called sales enablement. Back when I was just a sales trainer, sales coach, and working with strategy and working with growth departments to bringing processes and structure and learning and development. This has seen me travel the globe. So I've worked in North America, I've worked in Europe, I've worked in Asia Pacific, I've worked all over the place doing precisely that, working for small, nimble startups, right through to huge multinational corporates now, where I've got a responsibility of about 450 global sales reps to enable. So I've got some pretty varied experience when it comes to this stuff.
Awesome. That sounds like a big task to be managing, with the resources and strategies around so many people. We'll come on to that in a sec, if that's okay. But
Sure.
first of all, I just wanted to cover something that you said to me a long time ago and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I think you said to me once upon a time that you didn't actually sell. You weren't in a sales position yourself for that long before you went into sales training. Is that true? And if so, how long did you actually do the boots on the ground selling before you went into the coaching and enablement?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's true and it's not true in the sense that I think the company that I worked for when I first got into sales noticed in me the ability to coach and train, and they harnessed that and invested heavily in that to put me on lots of different courses, lots of different certifications, and they got a lot of value from me, and they moved me to Australia. I was selling properly for probably about 6 or 7 months before I got a team. And then a lot of that was coaching, but I was still sort of selling in the background. But I've gone and worked for startups where not selling isn't an option, where you can't just be the sales enablement guy. When you're working with these guys on calls, you still have to go through a sales process as well and follow a sales process. Don't get me wrong, I still get the joy of talking to customers, be it face to face or over the phone, and I still get that kick when a sale closes as well. So I've been lucky to be able to get that dopamine hit while still doing sales enablement. But my job now, I don't do any selling, no selling at all, apart from internal selling, I like to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you were selling the big deals as well as enabling 400 people, that would be,
Oh, God.
They didn't pay you enough if that's the case, whatever they're paying you. So yeah, the reason why I asked that is because, obviously, as you know from what I do, a lot of what I preach is around the process, and the way that you do things is equally as important as the background experience and the activity that goes on within whatever facet it is of what you're doing. And obviously, like you said, identifying the fact that you were good at putting in sales process, putting in sales coaching techniques and methodologies is just as important as, the other angle that a lot of sales coaches come from, which is I've worked in sales for 30 years and now I've become a coach because I can, teach these young guys the benefit of all of my experience over the years.
Yeah, and I think, look, for me, I thought about this a lot over the years. And if you can kind of, I guess, distill it down into a really simple message of what sales is it's 50% art and 50% science. And you can't have one without the other. A great analogy that was used for me was like Shakespeare's text, right? Like if you've got the greatest actor on stage, Shakespearean actor delivering Shakespeare's text, you see those two wonderful disciplines merged together. Whereas if you get a robotic voice to just read out Shakespeare's text, it's not great. On the other angle, if you just get the greatest actor in the world to go and freestyle what he believes to be Shakespeare's text, it will be a nightmare. So when those two things are married together, it becomes like a really elegant and, in my opinion, like quite amazing thing of being able to convince people through great process and really good persuasion skills and what I deem to be artistic merit. So yeah, that's always my answer.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I've got a lot of admiration for people that can so quickly pick up a skill or an art or a science, whatever it is, or a merger of the two. and be able to coach other people or to help other people through that process. And I come across it quite a lot as a younger guy, coming in and consulting experienced business leaders that have been running their own business for 15 years, and maybe they think the way that I do things today is the best way for my business, right? And it's difficult when you're a young guy trying to come into that arena and kind of stamp your authority on it a bit and say, well, actually, here's a process that was developed fairly recently, or a bit of software that's just come about, and it can do all of that stuff that you've been doing for years, but it can do it in 1/10 of the time and at a fraction of the cost of what you're used to doing it as. What's your kind of experience with that, like coming in as a younger guy and teaching the old guard?
Well, I don't know if I'm that young anymore, mate, but I'm knocking on the door of 40. But yeah, look, I think I like to look at it from this perspective, is that if you kind of take age out of the equation, I just think when you're coming into an organization and you're trying to change things, it's difficult. People don't like change. And by definition, in my role, I am a change agent, right? My job is to make things better, make them processes smoother, designed to make things more efficient, to identify problems and then go and change those problems. That's what coaching is you're trying to make them better at what they're currently doing and then find the weaknesses and improve on those weaknesses. So there's the techniques I've always leaned on to make that process easier. And I guess the advice I'd give is that you've got to get to the why behind you're making any change. That why. And I think you've just articulated a couple of really good ones there, is that if you can demonstrate that ultimately the world after this change is going to make you more efficient, it's going to make you, make things less time intensive. And the big one is always it's going to generate more revenue or save more revenue. And if you can really crisply and clearly articulate that change, that's what wins over hearts and minds. I learned that lesson early because I used to go in there like a bull in a china shop, just swinging the axe and trying to make changes and never giving context to the change. And you learn very quickly that you don't become a change agent, you just become a disruptive force. And it's difficult. And bear in mind, as a sales trainer, or even in sales enablement, I should say, is some of the changes you're making are going to harm people's career. So they're going to make them earn less money in some cases. I've worked for organizations where I'm putting in a new commission structure that I'm responsible for training people on how that now works, or putting in a new pricing model. And ultimately you're seen as the guy who's taking money out of people's pockets. So there's a delicate balance between defending corporate strategy and showing people why you're doing it. And I think if I could really articulate it, it's about, if the company's values are really clear and the decision is being made through the lens of those values, and the secondary to that, everyone's bought into those values, then it feels like you're all pulling in the same direction. But in my experience, organizations are often poor at articulating those values, poor at communicating them, and then don't make decisions through the lens of those values. And then they try and influence people who don't believe in those values. So what you end up getting is a real mess. So values really help because they can inform the decisions that you make. But it's hard. It's very hard, as you well know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the importance of going through as a consultant or as a third party that's coming into an established business. That's the importance of doing good discovery, right? It's not just discovering what their problems are, but it's also discovering internally, are they all aligned? They being the key stakeholders of a change process. Are they actually aligned with each other? And am I, as a consultant, going to have to cater to 3 or 4 different people's needs that actually just don't coincide, they don't align with each other, and therefore it's a complete uphill struggle all the way. If you've ever been in a kind of scenario where it's just impossible, you just can't get two equally two equally senior figures within a business to see eye to eye, and it's just a third option has to come about in order for it to be mediated properly, for example.
Yeah, I guess I've done it from your point of view as a consultant as well. I've gone into businesses and you're starting there by going, you need to scrap your whole sales process because it's not working for you and it's the wrong process for the types of product you're selling into, the market you're selling into, the velocity of the deal values. And I guess from a consultant's point of view, it's a lot easier because you can go in there and go, well, look, what's high impact and of most urgency, and you can get the customer to prioritize that. But when you're in the business itself and you're part of the business, there's a lot of different things that are at play, including like politics, including again like that whole land grab of people protecting what's important to them. And yeah, of course, there's been situations where you're almost at a standstill, and the worst thing to do, in my opinion, is do nothing. Like, that's always the worst thing to do. And sometimes it presents itself that that's the easiest thing to do. But if you've got a business problem that needs solving, you're better off starting that process of trying to solve it, even if you're doing that in-house to begin with. Without going to the market and buying a product, as an example. If you've got a set of tools that can help solve that internally, it's worth doing something. So many businesses are crippled by doing nothing and just expecting things to change, and they don't. And that paralysis can really harm businesses, because a year goes by and before you know it, you're even deeper into the rabbit hole and it's harder to undo things. It's tough. It's very tough.
That's particularly pertinent. I mean, we're at the end of 2020 as we speak right now. It's particularly pertinent right now because I think a lot of businesses have put plans on hold for the last, where are we? November, 6 to 9 months. People have been saying, well, we'll make that decision in 2021. And now as we approach the end of the year, all of a sudden it's, well, actually 2021's not that far away. Are we going to have to push this decision out again for another 6 months? Or in my opinion, some of the easiest, quickest and easiest and lowest cost changes that you can make is keep your existing workforce in place. If you're trying to sell more, let's say, or you're trying to do more with marketing, you don't necessarily need to expand your resources and invest in people. You can break apart what those people do, reassess that process flow and say, well, how can I implement a bit of software, or how can I implement a process that can automate or remove the need to do that 1 hour piece of admin that person does every day, which is taking away from their selling time or taking away from their content creation time, or whatever that is.
Well, particularly if you look at to scale a business, I mean, I think there was a fundamental flaw in the belief that you scale through people. Well, if you don't have the processes in place and you don't have the structure in place initially, scaling through people is actually only going to exacerbate the problem, because you've got more people doing more things wrong more of the time. The trick is to come up for air and go, well, look, we might need to start again before we go on a massive, recruitment burst or whatever the case may be. And you're spot on. It's like that age-old adage of like linear relationship between people and revenue generation is gone. It's taking longer for people to ramp. Less people are hitting target. I think it's 53% of people hit target on a monthly basis, according to like national statistics. What you're better off doing is making sure that those people are at least effective, even in the months that they're not billing. At least they're effective. And one of the quickest, easiest, and best ways of getting a return on investment is through technology. That's why so many people are out there competing with the technology space in terms of what they're creating for sales enablement. It's mental. I've never seen such an explosion of innovation happen in such a short period of time, and it's only going to get more with people working remotely.
Well, that's what I wanted to move on to next, actually. So you said you've been in the game for 15 years or so doing this, coaching and enablement work. What's changed over that time in terms of technology, and how that technology drives the success of your function and therefore of the salespeople that you are coaching and training on a daily basis?
Oh, everything's changed. I mean, look, when I first started in sales, the CRM we used was an offline server-driven CRM called Atex, where it was like using almost like a spreadsheet, right? It was all housed in the servers down in the room, which was a big room with loads of fridges in it. We're keeping it cold, and then occasionally it would go down, and you wouldn't be able to access your CRM. And now you look at Salesforce Lightning and the capability that has. I try and explain it to some of the younger reps coming in who moan about Salesforce Lightning, and you're like, you don't realize how lucky you got it. At least it's engaging and like does what you need it to do. Yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, as an example, I remember working with the training function with a big multinational media company, or a publishing house, and we had what you'd call the early stages of Gong, almost like a single-celled version of Gong before it's gone through the evolution it's gone through now, and everything was entered manually. So you'd have to type in the words manually that you were looking. You'd have to do all the analysis manually. So even things like the amount of time that someone was spending pausing, it was a manual process. The technology was helpful in a way, but you can see that those sort of like fledgling shoots have turned into what is a Gong now, where, I mean, God, the capability of that product is phenomenal. And that's just the starting point, right? What is it, 4 years old as a business? And it's imagine when it starts getting really into that data bank of AI, or of data that is collected, and they refine the AI, and all of a sudden I won't have a job, because all sales enablement and coaching would be like, no, you just plug into this computer and it tells you everything about yourself. But even stuff like, things like, we used to, marketing used to be one person sitting at the desk of sales, and you'd go and talk to them, and you'd interact that way. And now some of the tools around there where sales and marketing can collaborate in that process, and the amount of data that's being reviewed or looked at, or the multivariable testing or ABM stuff you can do nowadays is like phenomenal. I don't think salespeople really realize how lucky they are, and they'll be telling the next generation they don't realize how lucky they were when Gong was just this thing that just told you how often you were pausing. Now it bloody does the pitching for you. But yeah, look, it's been a complete overhaul, and I think over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, we've seen a particular spike in the innovation that's gone on in that sector, because I think sales enablement as a function has matured. I think it's been more refined and defined on what it does. And ultimately, I think people have realized that when you're the conduit between product and sales, it's really important you're getting the messaging right, because if salespeople aren't getting the messaging right from day one, your launch or your new piece of functionality or your new product, you're too slow in going to market, and you've wasted a load of time. So it doesn't surprise me that there's been this massive shift in innovation in sales enablement. But yeah, like I think, I remember building a lot of stuff in Excel, and now you can get some free tools online that do it for you. There's stuff in the Salesforce ecosystem where you can get a load of free tools that are really cool. And then I've discovered stuff that I've never even heard of before just by doing searches around the problem that I'm trying to solve. Like I wanted to embed Medic into Salesforce in terms of a scorecard, and I also wanted a playbook in there as well. Came across this incredible product called Close Plan. Quite a small company, use them. And they got bought, I think, by People, .ai, I think it was. And I found those guys for a good, just insane the amount of technology that's out there at the moment that can help you solve problems. But I guess that it comes down to that, is you've got to examine what the business problem is you're trying to solve, because there's this huge Venn diagram of products in sales enablement at the moment where they're all trying to do everything. What they end up doing sometimes is everything badly. Yeah. So you ideally want to have your tech stack complementing each other with great integration that solves the specific problems you're trying to solve. A jack of all trades is precisely that. You're only going to get a little bit of value from all of them and end up spending thousands upon hundreds of thousands of dollars on stuff that's not really effective or not really being used.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, a lot of the core of the consulting business that I do is predicated on the fact that a good CRM system like HubSpot or Salesforce or something like that, like you say, it is a bit of a jack of all trades. It will have capacity and a feature set to be able to do 80 to 90% of all of the things that you'd like to be able to do. HubSpot is a really great document repository. You can store documents there, you can manage a pipe there, you can do email marketing from there, you can do God knows all sorts of different stuff from there. But really, if you want to be on the fine edge of getting that particular process really high level, really engaging, if you want to do really good emails, then really you need to plug HubSpot into a better system that can do that to not just 100%, but you can really maximize and go beyond anything that you could have done previously if you didn't have a system like that. So you mentioned Gong, for example. Can you just give a really brief overview of what that is for the listeners if they haven't heard of Gong before?
Well, if you haven't heard of Gong, I suggest you get your wallet out and invest in them, because they're incredibly hot topic at the moment, and their functionality is phenomenal. Fundamentally, it's a conversational analytics tool, right? So if Gong was analyzing our conversation now, it'd be able to tell you who's doing the most amount of talking by percentage, it'd be able to tell you the keywords that are coming up, it'd be able to tell you which questions were asked, how you dealt with those questions, be able to tell you the gaps in silence, be able to tell you the patience ratio of how quickly you spoke after the other person. In terms of building a top line view of how your conversation went and the sweet spot analytics of what good and what bad looks like, it's the best tool in the market, in my opinion. But what they've done, which is really cool, is that it's become a kind of real-time coaching platform as well, where you can analyze a call, you can put comments on it on specific parts of that call. You can build scorecards in it. and show the feedback in the scorecards. It's just made coaching really laser focused. Where historically people would bring you a call and you'd listen to the call and try and get to the right bit. You'd end up sitting there for an hour without any value being derived from that coaching session. Now you can pick like laser focus in on a specific part of the call, and then you can scale that across every call. So you can look across the call and say how many times is someone saying this or doing that during the course of all of their calls. And the more data you plug into it, the smarter the AI becomes, and more predictive it comes. When you scale that across 400 people, it becomes really interesting. And when you plug it into your CRM, so it tells you at what stage in the sales process that call was as well. So if you imagine that negotiation review as an example is a stage, and it tells you how many times you're closing and pre-closing, and there's a correlation of people who don't close enough and them not generating revenue, well, the prescription becomes really easy, right? And then if you're smart, you can serve that content up through your CRM. So you can have a training session on negotiation that comes up when someone moves a call into the negotiation review stage through your CRM and your LMS speaking together. So it becomes the diagnosis for pretty much all the coaching and sales training you need to do as a manager and as a sales enablement function. It's a bloody good tool, and I recommend anyone buys it. When the time's right to buy it. Don't rush out and buy it if you've got 2 salespeople and you haven't worked out your value proposition.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that's the thing with these tools. There's, like you said earlier, maybe one day you'll be put out of a job because of automation and because of these tools becoming so human-like in their function. But really, these tools still need an overlay of someone who understands the process. They know what to look out for. They understand, if you're looking at one of those metrics, what does that mean? It's not just this metric came up this number of times and therefore the system recommends that you do something. When you have a human an input of someone experienced in sales, marketing, whatever the function is, obviously that adds a huge amount of additional feedback and additional value to the rep as well. But having said that, that type of tool is now becoming the sort of thing where if you're a smallish commercial organization and you've got maybe 10, 15 reps, typically a company of that sort of size, they'll have 1 sales director, 2 or 3 sales manager, and 15 reps or something like that. If you really, as the sales director, if you really want to maximize the potential of your team of 15 guys without having to invest in, a sales enablement or a coach, or send them off to third-party training, which costs a fortune, and things like that, these tools can really help with that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's shit in, shit out, right? So what I'd say is that if you haven't got a formalized sales process, if you haven't got a formalized qualification process, if you haven't got a formalized sales methodology, you can't just plug Gong in and it becomes like a panacea to all your problems. You got to work backwards from what systems and processes you've got in place. Now, exactly that way, it's shit in, shit out. That if you don't know what you're looking for and you don't know what good looks like, and you haven't got like a gold standard of what you want from a rep, Gong just becomes another product that no one uses that sits there and you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on. And like for me, like I think people make the assumption that technology solves problems, which it does, but you've got to define the problem that you need it to solve first. Because the danger is that you just keep looking to the market for technology, when really it's about how you're operating as a business that's not right. If you and I wanted to go and start our own soup kitchen now and we weren't selling soup, the easy thing for us to do is go, why don't we just get a vending machine and sell it from that? But if our product tastes like shit, you could have a vending machine, or you could have, whatever selling your soup. If it tastes garbage, then no one's going to buy it. So don't just look at technology to solve problems. Look at the fundamental basics of your business process and make sure that they're doing what you need them to do and they're servicing your business, because the product's not going to solve it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. And the way, not just the identification of the problem and the strategy and the process around the strategy, but also the quality of the actual implementation itself. How
Exactly.
it's technically embedded into the business is really important. I mean, the typical thing of like consultant in my space is I offer a service where I go in and basically write a written recommendation to a small business owner to say, yeah, you could do X, Y, Z, and I would recommend that you put this CRM in place and maybe 1 or 2 other bits of software that can really fine tune some of the edges of this process. And then they could take that away and say, okay, well, I'll go and get an intern to do it for 15 grand a year, and I'll get them to sit there for 6 months and work it out, right?
Yeah.
In theory, like,
Good luck.
You could learn how to implement HubSpot from scratch, and you could do it in 3 to 6 months, and get a really crap quality implementation at the end of the day that no one uses, no one finds any value in, and it gets scrapped 9 months later, and you've just wasted an annual subscription for nothing, right? So it's setting the goals, getting the implementation right, and then the embedding part of actually training people on how to use the system properly, and the inputs and outputs need to be good quality. Critically important, right?
Yeah, and I think, and this is probably going to sound counterintuitive to the advice I'm giving, particularly for your role, but my answer to this in the past has been try and build it internally and get people using it. Because then they'll turn around and go, it's solving the problem, but it's inefficient. So then you get people using it and interacting with it, and it being seen as a need in the business. And then when you bring in something that solves the problem properly through the product, all of a sudden they're like, this is like completely saved my life. And there's some simple stuff like Gong as an example, right? You can't have someone listening on every call, but you can build a scorecard. You can build a scorecard in Excel, and people get used to it and they go, this is bloody lovely. The only problem is I've got to listen to the call every time to do it. So it's a bit inefficient to do it. Oh, great. Well, now that you're using it and it's built into business process, the solution of Gong is great. Whereas if you just dump Gong on someone's desk and go and do this, where do I start? It's okay to start by trying to do these things in-house. And once people are addicted to it and they're using it and they're deriving value from it, then you can go to the market for a product.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned Gong a couple of times. What other systems you use on a regular basis? Like in terms of LMSs or repositories for information, and what other types of systems do you use, and what benefit do they give to a business?
Yeah, I mean, LMS is a must-have in my opinion. Particularly if you've got, let's say you've got more than 10 reps, you need to constantly be sending information to those reps, testing the reps, certifying those reps, the kind of gamification of the badges and stuff like that. So a decent learning management system is what you need. The one I'm most accustomed to, which I love, is one called WorkRamp. It's not like massively used in the market, which I'm surprised about, but I've gone through 3 or 4 big processes of embedding LMSs into companies, and for me WorkRamp is the best by a mile. There's a couple of bits of functionality that I love on it, and one is its integration with Zoom. So I can set you a task, I can do some training with you now and then set you a task for you to do it now over Zoom. It gets sent to me and I can score that Zoom call. But again, an LMS is another great example that it's hard to build. You've got to spend time getting your content together. You've got to spend time building out your modules, your curriculum. And it doesn't mean you now don't do training or coaching. It's just another delivery mechanism and another modality of engaging people. But you can run your onboarding process through it. So you can do pre-boarding before people start in your business. You can give them access to WorkRamp, and you can, first of all, test how good they are through WorkRamp, but you can test their hunger for doing the job. Someone turns up and you've sent them WorkRamp and they've not done any of the tasks in it. It's like, well, it's not a great sign for your onboarding process. So yeah, I mean, I think WorkRamp from an LMS point of view is really good. Integrates really well with Salesforce and other CRMs as well. I mean, I know you like HubSpot. I mean, Salesforce for me is the one. I like for I think
Sure.
For CRM, Salesforce is the best. I think Salesforce Lightning is a massive shift in what they've done and the value that can bring.
Again.
Also love the App Store there, or ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I've used like content repository. It's got to be always tempted to say suppository there, but that's very different, isn't it? Although some of them I've used in the past, they might as well be suppository. So yeah, I mean, HighSpot. Obviously, I've used HighSpot in the past, which is really good.
Yep.
But I learned a lesson with HighSpot. I try to use I try to use it as a way of creating training content to push through that and do it. And I learned very quickly that it was the wrong tool for the job. And this is the point, as in, like, you can't just buy a HighSpot and go, this is going to be our LMS and it's going to be our CMS. It's like, no. You need a specific tool for a specific function. But look, when you break down a sales process now, you're interacting with like 8 or 9 different tools, like sending out a proposal. It could be sent through DocuSign or one of the others out there. You've obviously got the fact that you're using a CRM at the same time as an LMS that's involved in it. You've got an outreach product like Outreach as an example, where you've set your sequences up and that's now doing a lot of the outbound activity for you. You're getting your content from HighSpot. You're getting your up-to-date content on certain parts of the product or use cases or testimonials. You're getting it from there. So the funny thing is that if you dissect the sales process, for different parts of the sales process, you need very, very specific tools. I don't know a business now that I don't work with. I haven't worked with a business that hasn't got LinkedIn Navigator as part of their sales lead generation. It's like it's a must-have.
Essential toolkit, right? Yeah. It's like a plumber turning up to work without a spanner or something. You can't do anything.
And then it's like, well, you got to now put Lusher over the top of it as well. And it's like, before you know, I've got 3 or 4 tools, and that's outreach. That's that's just like getting and prospecting the customer and getting in touch with them. So there's lots of different tools that you need to use during the sales process now, and I think that's why sales as a function is the real meat of your mental, right? It's like so much cost comes out of sales. Like 70% of most businesses is the cost sits in sales, but it's such a necessary function for doing what you need it to do, which is keep the lights on and keep revenue dripping in.
Absolutely.
So I mean, like I look at the tech stack that we've got at the moment, and it's so rich in what it does and what it needs to do. And I think COVID-19, with us working remotely, has shone a massive light on people's sales enablement tech stack. And people have seen very quickly that they were probably behind the 8 ball in some of the stuff they need. Like video outreach now is like the hot topic in sales. But me sitting here in my kitchen with like a 60-watt light bulb is not going to engage people, right? So people are having to send out now proper cameras, proper light stands, proper hoodies and caps and marketed swag that they're wearing in the video. So it's not just let's go and do video. And I said in a LinkedIn message the other day, in a LinkedIn post the other day, just because everyone's doing it, it doesn't mean they're doing it well. So you need a thought out strategy, and you've got to think about how it interacts with the other products that you have, but also the other processes that you have, and also what you're trying to achieve. Like doing video for the sake of doing video doesn't mean anything. Knowing that everyone's at home and it's got a 30% reply rate, and that people are more likely to look at video and know that it's a more accessible way of them learning about your proposition. That's a bit more interesting. How do we harness that and turn it as part of our workflow? That for me is not just let's do video.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's the same as like a professional photographer and someone that's just got the latest iPhone, which has got the best camera ever, right? It's not it's the same thing as saying, well, I can go and take professional quality studio photos now with my iPhone or whatever. I'm guilty of all the things that you just said, by the way, because currently I'm not using it, but I bought a light box so that I could do proper videos. And right now I've just got 2 lamps on my desk because I couldn't be bothered to set the light box up because it takes too long. But I spent like 50 quid on little tripods for my phone and a little mic for my desk. I don't use any of it anymore. I've just gone back to this and 2 lamps that are pointing at me right now. But it's you're right. Like video prospecting is a huge thing. I don't know if you've heard of a tool called Bonjoro at all.
Do you know what? I did today. Someone from their company liked one of my LinkedIn posts. I didn't go into any detail, but the brand I heard about today, funnily enough.
Yeah, check it out. I love their brand. I think it's I think that not completely off topic, but the concept of like doing B2B branding that's a little bit more B2C in terms of like style and tone. So they get that really spot on. I think they've got like a little mascot that's a bear, and he's sort of waving at you in the icon. It's like it's B2C marketing, but I think it works really well. But yeah, basically what they do is trigger an email or a notification to your phone as a sales rep when someone engages with a piece of outreach content. And then if you click on the notification, it loads up all the camera script and everything that you need to be able to record a quick intro video or a quick response video. So it encourages you to just get out and do like a 20-second. I saw that you clicked on that CTA in that email that you sent me. Obviously, you wouldn't use that language with a prospect.
Yeah, but, obviously not.
Let's collect. I saw that you didn't book a meeting with me. Why don't we do that?
That's cool.
I think it's really cool. And it's cheap. It's really cheap. It's like 10 quid per user per month. I can't go wrong with that sort of
all of this is just playing into this generation of salespeople that's coming through, right? The generation that's used to like sending Snapchats to each other and, like being on video. God, I'm starting to sound like a dinosaur myself now. but what the warning the warning I give is that it doesn't mean that all of a sudden that the baby boomers have left the workforce, you've still the right tool for the right audience. And calling sending a video to a CEO of you doing some zany thing, or like whatever it is you're doing, you got to know your audience a little bit. And I think part of the training we're putting together is not just around just do video, but it's about like be conscious about what you're doing on that video and who you're trying to engage and what they need to know. Like if you were reaching out to me on video and you didn't teach me something I didn't know before I watched the video, I'm unlikely to respond. I want to learn something from your video that I didn't know beforehand. Then you've got me, right? Then I'm engaged, and then the call to action becomes a lot easier. But I'm guilty of responding to quite a few of them, even when they're bad. Like the natural coach in me comes out and goes, "Oh, try and do this, try and do that," which is probably really patronising.
But that's giving value to people. Like free exchange of value is the best way to sell. Still, like a lot of the good business that I've done in this job is as a result of saying, hey, I noticed that your LinkedIn profile's not connected to your website, so when I click the button it doesn't go anywhere or something. Some kind of free advice that's just is throwaway to us because we work in it day in, day out, but to like a 60-year-old business owner that runs my ideal client's size of business, and they've got a sales force that might be using these types of tools, that free exchange of information can get you a seat at the table, right? And that's
undoubtedly, yeah. I mean,
to get.
That's the best way of prospecting. The best way of prospecting is showing that you're an equal in what you know and educating the client on something they didn't know about before that's relevant. It's the best way of prospecting, and it goes back hundreds of years. They found stuff in Pompeii where they're excavating adverts that are doing precisely that. Giving advice on how to do things. And all content marketing is just a way of doing that and putting a flashy name on top of it. It's the same thing. It's like alert them of the problem, educate them, and then show them there's a solution.
Exactly. So with all of these tools that are being used in the workplace, I mean, maybe give me a rough number. How many tools do you reckon your reps that you enable at the moment are using on a day-to-day basis in their kind of day-to-day activities, sales activities?
It's north of 10. I mean, it's like probably, again, this is just in the sales function. Then the way we communicate internally, the way that we communicate externally. There's so many different tools we use, but we're slightly different. Like we're a listed multinational organization, but some of the smaller organizations I've worked on, you can survive with 2 or 3 really good products. But it always starts with your CRM. You've got to start with a CRM. Exactly. If you're doing it before you've got a CRM, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be somewhere that ultimately everything funnels into, right? And that is your repository of arguably everything sales and marketing is in a business should really be in the CRM somewhere. Whether 100%. It's extractable in the right way or not is another thing. But
that's very different, yeah. Whether people have put the groundwork in of getting everything right initially to make it easy for use is another thing as well. But yeah, get that part right. You've got a massive sort of centerpiece in place where everything can just feed off of it.
So if your average rep or staff member is using, let's say, between 3 and 10 tools on a daily basis, have you seen over your time in the industry the amount of time spent doing kind of like commercial admin or sales admin, whatever you want to call it, as a proportion of their time? Have you seen that going up? And if so, what do you think we can do to kind of combat that and bring it back down so that you're giving more time back to do the high value tasks like selling instead of sales admin?
No, I'd say I've seen it gone down, but I think businesses make the mistake of aiming for perfection, and you're just never going to get that with sales. You're never going to get everyone doing everything right all the time, and I think you've got to have a kind of 80% standard with it. And I know that sounds sort of counterintuitive, like to the advice that I was giving before, but everyone following your sales process to the T is great. Doesn't mean they're going to sell more. Yeah. Like you've got to encourage that flexibility in the salesperson because it's a people business, right? People are buying from people. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create the optimum way of doing it most of the time. And anyone walking into your business for the first time can learn the optimum way of doing it quite quickly. So I think there's definitely something that holds businesses back is trying to get it 100% right. But I've definitely seen it go down in terms of the amount of admin that reps need to do. But I think part of the reason for that is because, particularly in my experience, trying to get the reps to do the important things first, that's really going to help, like, make it easier for the customer to buy and easier for you to sell, is really where the value is. And then the secondary stuff that falls out the back of it, you can kind of take it or leave it. If that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I'll try and give an example, but I just think you shouldn't be aiming for perfection. Reps aren't always going to fill in every critical piece of information in a CRM. I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, it's
but
true.
Let's try and get it as close as we can.
Exactly. So what advice would you give a manager, like a mid-level sales manager that's got a team of reps that they're responsible for, in terms of coaching advice to give to them, in order to get them to focus on the important parts and the high value bits of the admin, and maybe, overall optimizing the way that they work with their sales admin and the time that they've got allocated to it? What advice would you give to managers to get them to really, move in the right direction with that?
Well, there's some fundamentals that you always need, right? Like when you're capturing information on a new client, you want it to be as broad as possible. But the point now is that, like, you don't have to funnel through your notes. You can just go back to Gong and listen to it. So structure your day accordingly. Here's the great thing on Gong is you can take out your voice. You're only listening to what the client's saying. So structure your day accordingly. If the rep's doing 100 outbound calls to the market and they're getting good conversations with 6 of them and there's key information in there, that's 15 minutes worth of work to rep to do that. So structure the day accordingly. But look, if you distill down the ultimate job of a manager, right, it's making the rep better than they were yesterday. Yeah, that's the fundamental part of their job. Number 2 is conveying the overall company strategy in a way that the rep is excited and wants to work at that business. Yeah, and that includes the values. And number 3 is creating a localized culture where the rep's head springs off the pillow every day and they want to come and work for you and your team. And then lastly, report on that information. In my experience, where do you think managers spend most of their time in the job? Probably reporting on the information. So they often are guilty of doing the very thing that they tell their reps not to do, which is do the things that are the most business critical. And that's the same with managers. Like, don't worry about reporting. If your manager above you can't get the right information, it's not because you're not reporting. It's because they can't use the CRM correctly, or they've not built a report to do it properly. There's certain things that you have to report on. There's certain things that you should say no. You've got to push back on stuff that's not business critical. And it's the same with reps, is that you should be encouraging them to do the stuff that's actually going to affect business coming in, that's going to make it easy for the customer to buy. Now, this is where businesses go wrong, is they create a really elaborate, as an example, authority matrix through Salesforce. And all you end up doing is bottlenecking deals where people find it impossible to buy your product. Yeah. Or they make their terms and conditions so rigid that you can't ever sell your product. Well, look, you're going to have to give and take a little bit for people to purchase your products, and just put some standard red lines that you'll accept and won't accept and in there, and let the reps go and sell it. You're never going to get 100% all the time.
Yeah, I remember as a sales rep in a previous company, effectively, I think it was 4 layers of authorization that had to go. Obviously, it goes up bracketed with the value of the deal or the value of the discount that was being applied. Yeah. But then if at any point in that process you had to go to legal to start redlining the T's and C's, for some reason the whole process resets back to ground floor. So then you have to go back through it again. If that happens 3 or 4 times, you might end up going through like 20 or more rounds of approval, right?
Just imagine being the customer. Imagine being the customer in that experience. Yeah, I mean, I've gone through that, and I've turned round to the company and said, I just want to give you my money. It's all I want to do. And they make it hard for you to do that. And I think that's the point, is that the process actually ends up negating the end result, which is getting people to purchase your product at the right price point, and getting long-term value from the customer where you can go back to the well if you need to. And it's like, if your internal processes and your technology aren't doing that, something's wrong. You've not thought it through properly. Exactly the way you said.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's so important to really get to the nitty gritty of like what is blocking the client from being able to execute on finishing this deal, or what's blocking the sales rep from being able to execute on finishing this deal. And
exactly right.
If any part of that can be automated in any way or optimized in any way, that should be the first thing that you go to, really. If you're confident that your reps are of good quality and they're doing a good job, And generally speaking, when there's no barriers in the way, they're closing at the rate that you want them to be. It's more than likely it's going to be something around the process than the
100%,
the
100%.
quality
Yeah.
of them. Okay, so just to round off, like to ask this question because I think it's useful for people to have these places to go to find information. So in terms of your kind of places that you go when you're looking to select a new tool, or if you're looking for information about what's out there in the market that can help me achieve whatever your goals are, obviously you start with Google, everyone does, but where do you go after that? Have you got like a place that you go in particular to help you source and find the best tools out there and get them implemented properly, and practical advice to get them implemented?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. So I'm part of a couple of global sales enablement communities on Slack. And, I think that they're really good places to start because you're all in the same boat and people try and help each other out. So that's always really useful for me. If ever I've got any questions that I don't have the answers to, I can go on there. And I'd say that's the same with LinkedIn groups as well, is that if you're in a decent LinkedIn group where you trust the quality of the people that are contributing, then it's always worth asking that question. The question you should always state is the business problem you're trying to solve as well. Don't go out there and go, oh, what's a good CRM? Give context with the problem you're trying to solve, because you'd be surprised how many little products out there can solve those problems as well. If you just go looking for a good CRM, you'll get it. Salesforce, HubSpot, same people saying the same things. If you turn around and said, we're struggling because we can't embed our qualification process through our CRM, does anyone know of a CRM or a plugin that does that? Then you'll get a very different variety of answers. The other advice I'd give is that I'd go as close as you can to the buying process with all of the ones that you look at. And I'd ask to look at the roadmap of all the products you look at as well. And if they can provide a roadmap with times and there's a piece of functionality down the road that's going to be helpful for you, it's really useful. So don't just go in there in the product in its current incarnation, because these are SaaS products. They'll have a roadmap, and they should have a dated timeline roadmap as well, and they can talk you through how that helps and how other problems that would solve. But see as many of them as you can. I know it's time intensive, but see as many of them as you can, because you'll be surprised that there might be just a couple of things that you didn't think one you were going for could do that another one can, and it changes your mind. And I had that 2 or 3 times with the LMSs I've bought in the past.
And yeah, like you say, longevity, that's a really good point. Longevity of the solution, not just how it is today. It's a safe assumption to say that all of them, any system that you invest in now, should be there in 3 years' time if it's a good product, right? So it's not just about the architecture, the infrastructure of how it's hosted, how it works, how good their customer success is for their clients and things like that. It should be expected nowadays, but it's more about, where is this product going to be? The guy that I was speaking to on the podcast the other day was saying ClickUp is his kind of tool of choice for project management at the moment. And if you look at ClickUp as it stands today, it's similar, but it doesn't quite hold up to something like Monday or Asana. But then if you take the 1 year roadmap of each of those 3 products and you look at where the 3 of them are going to be a year from today, ClickUp is promising to have all of the functionality that the other ones are going to have and more, and it's like a quarter of the price. So
exactly. There you go. Exactly right.
Really important consideration. Okay, and the final thing, if it's possible to do this at all, and I know it's a very difficult question to answer in one kind of concise metric, but if you were a small business owner and you were starting out on this journey of optimizing your overall commercial processes, so let's say you're about to implement a new CRM, you didn't have one before and you're about to implement a new CRM to build from in the future, what do you think the key factor for success, or the key metric that you should be keeping an eye on, is throughout the first year of implementing and then assessing the successfulness of that type of program?
Well, I'd say from a sales perspective, it's how well it manages your pipeline. But that's it. If you just, if you look at the fundamentals of what sales is, it's having a healthy, effective pipeline. And if you can move from one stage to another, and you can see how long you're in that stage, you can see your conversion rates, you're going to put yourself in a great position. Everything else is a bit of a bell and whistle at that stage.
True, very true. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks very much for your time, Aaron. Really enjoyed it. We haven't spoken for a while, so it's actually been really nice to catch up as well.
Likewise.
And yeah, good luck with everything that you're doing. Hopefully, your current employer finishes off the year strongly, and you can continue to enable those 450 guys to do even more in 2021.
Mate, we're in business intelligence, so during COVID, that's all people want is what's happening with the market. Our share price has gone up. We'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
no doubt. Yeah, it's one of those industries that has just gone bananas this year.
Yeah,
You know,
100%.
I was saying to a client earlier, for every retail, like brick and mortar retail, there's also a back end logistics company that's delivering 5 times as many parcels as they were a year ago, right? So
So
it's all
true.
swings and roundabouts. Awesome. Okay, thanks, man.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.